Welcome to The Kingstonian, a podcast that profiles people who are passionate about what they do for a living, what organization they belong to, or the community they are a part of. Here is your host, Dave Cunningham.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone, and welcome. There are many communities that are blessed to have some sort of public foundation dedicated to understanding the needs of and improving the well-being of the citizens around them. These foundations typically receive gifts from donors, manage the pooled assets, and distribute the income as charitable gifts. Our guest is the newly appointed Executive Director for the Community Foundation for Kingston Area. He has over 25 years of experience in fundraising, development, and nonprofit management. In this episode, a look at his journey to this position, his enthusiasm and his passion for bringing donors and receiving agencies together. Here is our conversation with Stacy Kelly. Stacy, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for giving us some time today.
Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to be here.
Before we get started, we should tell the folks who are listening that this particular episode is being recorded in mid-April 2023. I want to spend some time talking about the Community Foundation for Kingston and Area, a very important agency in this community. But let's begin with how you developed a passion for this industry, and we'll begin by going back to when you graduated from Queen's back in 1996. And I'd like to know, you had a degree in philosophy, and I'd like to know at that particular point, what did you think your career path was going to look like?
What a wonderful question. It's actually great to ask that little fellow if he remembers. But so in 1996, I came out of Queen's philosophy and wanted to stay in the city. So I actually ended up working at Trailhead Kingston, which is still going. It's moved, but I was the manager there. And I was starting to, think about career. And one of the things I did think about is potentially continuing on in sort of the retail world, expanding, even into the U.S., in August 2000, Queens came calling, but this time with an opportunity to engage in recruitment and admissions. And I thought, well, that would be a really wonderful blend of my talents. I enjoy public speaking. I enjoy connecting with people, and I have a deep affection for Queens. So it was a new opportunity for me to grow that way and begin with little did I know, begin a career in what is called institutional advancement that really started at that moment in time and way back in 2000.
There's something I'm sort of curious about. I went to Queens as well, but I was at Kingston, and I finished my high school here, so I just applied and got into Queens. And when you are a recruiter for students, and I assume we're talking students from outside the city, from outside the country, what's that process like? Is it like recruiting players for a basketball or a football team?
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I had the great real privilege and pleasure to travel all across Canada, so every province, a number of states in the Northeast, and about 25 other countries to represent Queens. And particularly when I was traveling through Canada, it really was, I used to always say this sort of joke, but it wasn't really a joke, which was I was really going out there to find Queens students. I wasn't trying to encourage everyone I met to apply to Queens. It was really trying to help people make really good choices about the type of opportunity, type of experience they wanted to have at university. And I thought that Queens had its own special sauce, which is why I chose Queens. And it was really trying to find people who might, similarly be attracted to what I thought was a really interesting and engaging student experience. So it was, really helping people, meeting with parents, meeting with counselors, and of course, meeting with youth in high school to hopefully inspire and educate them and help them really make the best choice for them.
How would you describe the special sauce that Queens was offering at the time?
So I grew up in Quebec, and so
whereabouts in Quebec?
In the Outaouais, so okay. Which is in the West Quebec, and I grew up in a small hamlet called Breckenridge, and then we moved to the big city of Elmer, which is now a part of Gatineau. But my first love in terms of university actually was Bishop. So I thought, that would be a really neat place to go, and a lot of friends who were, as I like to say, running away to go to university and college were looking at McGill. And, this sort of, what was I, 15, 16, and I kind of came to the conclusion at that time, again, this is the late 80s, that Queen's kind of had that prestige and academic reputation of a McGill, but really the campus feel and kind of close bonding that you would see at a Bishop. So I thought at that time it was kind of the best of both worlds, and that was really a big influence on why I came to Queen's.
Was there a difference in promoting Queen's to potential students from across Canada as opposed to students from outside the country?
Yeah, students outside the country were certainly much more interested in understanding the ranking of the institution. Like, rankings were a really big deal overseas, more so than in Canada, and certainly was important in the United States. Although I must say, people in the United States were quite interested in understanding sort of what kind of experience Queen's was offering, but definitely overseas. And I get it; there are literally thousands of universities to choose from, so understanding where your university placed in comparative rankings was a key tool. At least it was a door opener for the conversation. At that time, I was recruiting for the Queen's full-time MBA, which had gotten a number one ranking from Business Week. So that was a powerful lever for me when I was overseas.
Now, after you finished your time at Queen's, at least initially, that would be around 2010, 2011, you moved to OCAD University. And for those of us who may not be too familiar with that particular institution, would you describe it for us?
Oh, OCAD is a really special institution, and it started as the Ontario College of Art, then became the Ontario College of Art and Design, and then shortly before I joined, became OCAD University, which is how it goes now. But some of the folks, from previous generations still lovingly refer to it as OCA or the college. It really is. It's Canada's oldest and largest art design university. And some of if you think about a lot of the ad campaigns you've seen over the past 50 years, logos, package design, the vast majority of it have been grads from the design department at OCAD. And I think also some of our, most well-known painters either studied there or taught there, or sometimes both. So it is proud to be, I think, really the incubator for a lot of the great sort of Canada's cultural, assets. And it was a great experience to be there and be part of advancing that very unique institution.
Is it a big institution? What would the student body be like?
Oh, you're getting me there. I mean, it's certainly a small institution, especially by Canadian standards. I think, at the time around maybe 5,000 full-time students. And so it had grown, I think, during my time, certainly since I've left, but definitely a smaller institution and really focused on, arts and design. And there are some also liberal arts, liberal studies programs.
Now, a lot of the information that we're talking about with reference to you, I gleaned from looking at your LinkedIn profile. And the impression I get, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if your experience at Queen's was focused on more recruiting students, for instance, here at OCAD, it seemed to me that you were working more with alumni.
Well, I did do a transition when I was at Queen's into an admissions recruitment role into what we call, in our field, advancement. So, which was on the fundraising, development, and alumni relations side. And that really began at the School of Business at Queen's. And then I went to work at Central Advancement at Queen's in a campaign role. And so when I moved over to OCAD in Toronto, it was really primarily focused on development, alumni relations, and really helping them to, what's the word I'm looking for, sort of, shore up and reimagine and re-energize alumni relations at OCAD University. And so that's why they brought me in there. And I had a number of roles in that department and progressed up to become associate director, and was a key player in what was then the Ignite Imagination campaign for OCAD University. So it was really exciting times. I will say, very fond memories of OCAD, and it's such an interesting institution. It's while it's a university, I think a lot of its friends and patrons and supporters also see it as a cultural institution. So we had similar donors that you would see to the Art Gallery of Ontario, to the Gardner Museum, even to the Royal Ontario Museum. So they really see it as sort of a cultural institution that's creating, the future of art and design. And so it was a really, really unique place, and really, really enjoyed being part of that, and met some extraordinary colleagues who I'm still in touch with to this day.
Now, when we talk about alumni, we talk about folks who, after they've graduated, get letters from the university or the college or wherever they went, asking them to kick in some dollars periodically to help support the institution. How important is it for an institution, whether it be Queen's or OCAD, to get that kind of money coming in from alumni? What proportion do you think, do you have a sense that the university relies on alumni donations for its sustenance?
Well, I think it's really important, and I know it's very complicated in terms of the funding of universities. But the truth is that the kind of the aspirational piece of any institution that you care about, those aspirations, the reach for excellence, the reach for something new and innovative, is actually largely only funded by donations or grants. So, while we are all publicly funded institutions, that's really sort of base funding to kind of keep operations. It often doesn't sort of fund excellence, and each university has to go and seek funding, and sometimes that's granting organizations, and in many cases it's private donors and individuals and families who are supporting, that, again, looking on the horizon to fund what's possible and what's next. So the truth is, it's actually very important because, no 100% funding is ever going to come from a government source, for example, or even a research grant. It has to be a combination of those sources of funding, again, to really push the university. And sometimes it's programming. Very many cases, it's student aid, scholarships, and bursaries. And sometimes it's, I was happy to be part of, funding something like Brand New, and before I left, I was able to be part of funding a brand new master's program. And that completely was underwritten by an endowment created by a family foundation. And so, that would not be possible. Those students now, those future leaders in that field, would not have been possible without those private funders.
Mm-hmm. The support of the alumni and other people. About 5 or 6 years ago, you changed jobs and moved over to the 519, which is an organization I've never heard of before. Describe what it is.
Oh, well, the 519 is a very special place indeed. So the 519, the formal name is the 519 Church Street Community Center. It's Canada's most prominent LGBTQ2S community center and service provider. It's really a real rock of an institution. It's a Canadian leader in advocating, providing programs and services dedicated to LGBTQ and 2S communities, as well as its local neighborhood of downtown Toronto East. It's an anchor. It's been there since the 70s, and I was the director of philanthropy there and had the great privilege to work with an incredible group of passionate and committed staff and volunteers and donors who really care about advancing genuine inclusion and social justice. So extremely, extremely fond. And while listeners can't hear it, you can see the pictures of my former teammates who are in my desk just to remind me of where I've been and where I'm going. And those years there were very, very formidable for me, and we worked hard. And of course, that's when the pandemic hit. So I have the pandemic memories of our time there, and that we never stopped operating. We never closed. We just kept being there for community, and it's a really special and unique place.
In light of some of the other experiences you've had with respect to career, how did this one differ from the universities that you worked with before?
Well, at its heart, the 519 is a community center. So, you as a fundraising professional, sometimes you can be somewhat removed from some of the direct impact that your work is doing, by bringing in those resources and hopefully inspiring, educating people to get on board with the cause, as we say. And in this case, because it was a community center which was packed, 7 days a week with the programs and the participants and community members, you really just saw it. And I would also get engaged at times and have a chance to work with folks and just really be on those front lines, especially during the pandemic. It was we all switched to an essential services mode so that we could be there for community, because we were, I remember back to that March, whatever the exact date was, but March 2020, and the existential crisis was, how does a community center continue to help community when you can't have them come in the community center? That was really the existential question. And I'm just so proud of what we did to respond to that question. It was, I used to joke about, well, there goes, shredding the the annual plan, because all of a sudden, for those who study business and talk about disruptive forces, there was never ever quite the disruptive force like this. And we just realized that the North Star was community and service and need, and that we had a moral and responsibility to be there. So we did. And I'm so proud of that incredible team and the incredible leadership there, and we showed up every day.
A major exercise in thinking outside the box with respect to the pandemic and how to deal with it.
Absolutely, because we had no handbook, right? There was no, I was part of the director's table. There was no handbook that said, oh, by the way, in case of a, shutdown of everything around you, here's what to do. And so I really, I have to give credit to our executive director, Maura Lawless, and our senior director, Becky McFarlane, and others who I thought were just extraordinary leaders through what was a really challenging time. But again, when you're united with a purpose, you can just see, we all came together and, as I say, showed up every day for the community. And I'm really proud of that time. And I will also say, we doubled our donors in that year. So people also really stepped up to support what we were doing. I think we did a good job of telling the story of what we were doing and why we needed help. And thankfully, people stepped up to that call.
Mm-hmm. That brings us up to last August, when you arrived back in Kingston to take on this new role with the Community Foundation for Kingston Area as its executive director. And for those folks who may have downloaded this particular episode who don't live in Kingston, don't live in Ontario, may not even live in Canada, can you describe a little bit the origins of this particular foundation?
Yeah, the origins, it actually goes back to the late 80s, but this organization was officially founded in 1995. And folks in the Kingston region will recognize some names of the founders. So people like Michael Davies and Evelyn Flint and Jeannie Rosen and many others were heavily involved. There was a sort of group of people who came together to realize that if we come together as community members to really better our community, and what can we do to make that happen. And for those of you who are maybe not familiar, the Kingston Harbor is dotted with what are these Martello Towers built in the 19th century, and the origins of the foundation were as the Martello Society. So it was this, this sort of symbol of sort of very, very Kingstonian symbol, and, the limestone tower, that kind of stability and support. And I think there was something powerful there. And the idea being, how do we come together, pool our funds, and support important causes in Kingston to make life better. So that grew into a formal foundation, which essentially pools money that is donated into invested funds that can then grow over time, and most importantly, grant out funds annually to charities around Kingston. To date, we've supported at least 240 charities in the region. And I think it's just an extraordinary accomplishment to see that early vision of a few people coming together to say, what can we do? We're seeing issues, we're seeing problems, and I'm really trying to do something about it. And so I feel very blessed to be joining now as we approach our 30th anniversary to honor the incredible work of those who've come before us, as both the staff and leadership, board and volunteers, who at the end of the day, it's about sort of how do we create these sort of made in Kingston solutions by Kingstonians, by other people in our kind of greater Kingston area, to say, when I want to do something, these are the charities and causes that mean something to me, and I want to support them.
Where would this organization fit in the context of other groups in town that do something similar? And I'm thinking of United Way as an example.
Yeah, there's actually quite a few foundations, or what is known as a public foundation. There are private foundations in Kingston. There's wonderful organizations like the United Way. I think the biggest difference really is what I was alluding to, which was the vast majority of donors and families and organizations that engage with us create funds here that they then that we then take the capital of those donations and invest over long term. So these are funds held at perpetuity, so that we can provide ongoing support to many charities. There are other things you can do with us. So you could do flow-through gifts where you can make a gift to us so that we can take care of your philanthropic wishes and redirect to the charities of your choice. And there are some people who have their own name funds, and they have very specific charities in mind that they want to support through their endowed fund. And other folks have what's called a donor advised fund. So there's a little bit more conversation with us on an annual basis in terms of their selecting the fund. So I think there's a number of different ways to engage with us. Your audience may like to know that there's quite a host of funds hosted that support the Kingston Symphony, for example, that support Camp Outlook, for example, Pathways to Education. We have a wide variety of fields of interest, and so chances are there's probably a charity that we're working with or have supported.
So you already answered my next question, so we'll go on to something else. I'm curious to know the size of the pool that you're working with.
We currently have about $30 million in investments, and that's roughly 240 funds that have been set up by Kingstonians and folks in the greater Kingston area to, again, it's about funding what matters to them and funding, change, funding action, and making sure that we're supporting the charities doing the incredible work. We are, I like to say, quite humbly, we're a conduit. We're a conduit between, our donors and our passionate community members who want to make a difference in Kingston and surrounding areas. And we help facilitate their giving, their passion, what matters to them. And that sometimes to, direct gifts. I'm certainly working a lot with folks who are planning their estates, who care about sort of legacy and really thinking, again, it's always about what comes down to what matters to you, what means the most to you. How do you want to continue to making a difference even after you're no longer with us?
So given the fact that the organization is celebrating 30 years of existence, so you walk in the door last August, what were your first priorities when you had a look around the office?
I think I'd like to think I've come in and I'm grateful to the board for saying yes to me, bringing in aspirations for the foundation. I think there's nothing but extraordinary potential to take the foundation to the next level, to be, I think, a real leader within the city in the charitable sector, to advance our charitable sector, the capacity of our sector. I really want us to be seen as an asset and a toolkit for organizations. For professional planners, for example, lawyers, financial experts, and also the industry itself, all of the charities. I think we have a role to play in advancing them, their knowledge, their capacity. So in order to do that, needed to really hire some great new talent for the foundation, which we have been doing. So really, in those first few months, it's really been sort of shoring up some of the internal pieces to get us ready. We have implemented a brand new, very important software for us. For those in the business that donor customer relationship management database, CRM. That is a game changer for the foundation. It will enable us to do some things and engage with our supporters in a way that has not been possible. So some of those kind of maybe inside baseball, but really important. As I like to say, we're building a new plane on the runway. We're hiring the crew. We're make sure that the plane has the right equipment it needs, and then we're going to be flying soon, and I'm really excited about that.
And hopefully you're not flying out of Fort Lauderdale.
Indeed.
As we record this particular conversation, there was some really serious flooding in Fort Lauderdale, which closed the airport for a day or so. Your duties would involve, I would guess, a lot of communicating. Spend a lot of your time communicating with donors, with agencies, with people that work for you, people that you want to work for you. And would that be the prime thing that you'd be doing in your position right now? Yeah,
that's a great sort of summary in terms of, there's that sort of internal look to make sure everything is going well operationally, making sure we have all the right assets, and that's humans, people, and technology, and then really that sort of external focus of opportunities like this and others to have conversations and to spark dialogue about how people might want to engage with the organization. And yeah, I really enjoy meetings with I've been meeting with a number of current donors and meeting with some prospective donors. And that includes agencies. I failed to mention we also hold agency funds, and so In other words, there are charities that have their fund with us. And so that's one of our value adds, is we have the capacity, of course, to manage and hold and grant from funds. So these are all really engaging. I've been calling it my rediscovery tour. As you alluded, I did live in Kings for the better part of 20 years, but was gone for 11. And there certainly have been some changes. So I've been really enjoying this rediscovery tour to better understand the current context, and then again how the community foundation can play a role in that. If we think about the recent declaration, by the city of a state of emergency for Kingston, then that to me is a clarion call to all of us to think about how do we help. I've been thinking about sort of, it's a made in Kingston. We're not always going to get the help we want or expect from external sources. Yeah. So what can we do as a city, as a community, to step up for each other? And I think we have a role and duty to be part of that conversation. And I think that's something that I'm very open to. And we've already been having some important discussions around the city, and we want to be an important partner there.
So it's very important for the foundation to be addressing what the community needs in terms of, like you just alluded to, some of the information coming out of City Hall about what the community should be focusing on. So that's something that I would guess would change over time depending upon what circumstances were out there at a given point.
Yes, and just to go back to our previous conversation, it was probably one of the greatest lessons I had from being at the 519, which was, we're going to do our annual plans. We obviously have strategic plans, but at the end of the day, we need to make strategy is also about the things you choose not to do, because you need to do other things. And it was always about what was emerging and what was emergent community need for us in our context in downtown East. And so I bring a similar ethos here, which is, what are the signs for those people who are interested in sort of signs and trends and sort of that environmental scan piece, or even sort of future planning, future scenarios. We have to be listening to what our community is telling us, and that's how, to me, we can be a responsive and responsible community foundation.
What sorts of challenges did the foundation go through during the pandemic? I know you weren't here, but I'm sure there are notes somewhere that maybe you're compiling a manual to address this going forward and putting it on the shelf somewhere. But do you have a sense as to what sorts of things the foundation did try to do during the pandemic to continue its work?
Well, certainly, the pandemic was very challenging operationally, right? When you have to, this is very much a small office-based team, and then sort of that implosion that happens with the pandemic and people being scattered, that affects culture, that affects relationships. It certainly, I know, was a challenge in terms of, how do we, oh gosh, now we have to think about how to operate our organization in this new model that we'd never thought of before. So, I know they handle it with aplomb, and they we all had no choice but to figure it out. So certainly I know that was a big thing. And I think, though, that my understanding is that donors were well aware and understanding of what was going on in the greater context, and understood, and certainly the board did as well, then that there was a need to respond to urgent community needs. So I know that there was interesting partnerships that happened with the foundation and another foundation. And again, I think the dialogue with our friends United Way, dialogue with the city. So I'm aware that, they did what was right, which is reaching out and figuring out how do we help during a very difficult time. And, all credit due to those who came before me. But I think, again, there seemed to be a similar response, which was, we need to do what's right.
Mm-hmm. You've been in the job 8 months or so. What's the favorite part of your job?
Oh, meeting with donors. I love hearing from them about what matters to them and learning about their stories, and, always grateful when people share those stories with me, and, why they came to this particular decision and moment in time, and to engage with us. And, it's about connecting with each other. Mm-hmm. And again, I know I'm repeating it, but it's always about sort of what matters to someone and what's meaningful to them and why they want to make this particular decision. I'm always moved by it, and I'm moved by the spirit of generosity, and I'm moved by the great love that people have for this city and region, which I did. I came to Queens at the tender age of 17, and I can tell you it was love at first sight, and not just the university, but I made a very decided point to always wander around, and I was quite chagrined. Many of my fellow students didn't seem to leave campus, but I really explored Kingston right away, and I fell in love with all the historic sites and just the place, and it's a love affair that never ended. So for me, it means the world to me to be back.
Yeah, Kingston is one of those places. I'll agree with that, that's for sure. There are many foundations like this one that are located in different communities, as I said, around the country, around the world. And I'm curious, as it relates to this particular foundation, what's one thing that the people who live in this town don't really know about the foundation that they should?
That it's funded by fellow Kingstonians. It's not a government entity. It's not a city entity. It's funded by folks like you and me, partners, families, individuals, organizations. Again, to return sort of my opening comment is about who really want to make a difference in the city by creating funds that continue to support the city on an ongoing basis. And I think that's what's really special. It's really sort of for Kingstonians by Kingstonians. It's very much a made in Kingston solution. We are part of a network. As you mentioned, there are at least 199 community foundations across Canada, and if there's any listeners in the United States, there are definitely community foundations in the United States. It's a beautiful model of, again, citizens coming together to collectively solve their community's issues.
Best way for people to contact you if they want more information about the foundation?
I'd be delighted to have conversations. If you want to do some initial digging at www.cfka.org, or you can call us at 613-546-9696, or email it directly. It's ED, stands for Executive Director, ed@cfka.org, and I'd love to have a conversation.
And we'll put that information in the liner notes to the podcast episode as well. I want to thank you very much for your time today, and all the best going forward in your efforts to make sure this money is directed to the right places in the community to make it a better community.
Thank you so much. Together we can make a difference. I appreciate the time today.
Our guest in this episode, Stacy Kelly, the Executive Director of the Community Foundation for Kingston Area. The contact point Stacy mentioned can be found in the liner notes to this podcast. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back soon.
The theme music for the podcast is Stasis Oasis, written and performed by Kingston musician Tim Aylesworth. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions about any of the episodes, please send a note to thekingstonianpodcast@gmail.com. For details on upcoming guests, follow us on Facebook. The Kingstonian Podcast is hosted by Dave Cunningham and produced in Kingston, Ontario, Canada.